carefully now, I would say that the first sign that something strange might have been happening would be about a month and a half ago when we first got a letter in our mailbox telling us that the ownership and management of this entire building is being transferred over to a new company and that we're to start depositing our rent into a new bank account. So we didn't think much of it. We were just mainly concerned that it might be a scam because it's asking us to put our money somewhere else. But we checked with our friend that lives in the same building as well as a few other units, and we confirmed that the letter was legit. So we just did what we were told and went on with our lives. The letter didn't mention anything else that we had to be concerned about. Then fast forward a couple weeks later, we weren't home at the time, but we saw in our doorbell intercom like camera thing that someone in a suit had been ringing our bell a couple of times in the same week, and we thought it was just a persistent salesman. Maybe it's because we're from North America, but we expect that anything important to be done through official mail or email or maybe a phone call, but never just like coming right to our door. But turns out in Japan that does happen, and this was the case this time. We got a text from our friend that lives in this building, and he told us that a representative from the new company that owns our building was trying to get in touch with all the different units to say hi, and he wanted to set a time to meet us. And so we were going to meet together with this friend because he knows Japanese and he's happy to help us translate everything. So we just thought, okay, this is probably just them being really polite. They want good business relations with their new tenants. So we're like, okay, it's like pretty harmless, simple, just a hello, right? Turns out the reason for the meeting is not what we expected. We bumped into someone that lives in the building and she already had her meeting. So she told us that the real reason is that they're planning to demolish the building and they need everyone to move out. So basically, we're all getting evicted. So at her meeting, they offered to let her stay rent-free until the end of November, which is about 6-7 months worth of free rent, in exchange for her, of course, agreeing to move out by then, also signing an agreement to break her current lease contract. And she did not sign it because she says it's not a strong offer, which is true, and I'll get into that later. But right now, the point is that we were super lucky that we bumped into her and found out all of this before our meeting. Otherwise, we would have been definitely caught off guard. Of course, we were a bit shocked and sad to hear that we're being evicted because we recently spent some effort redoing our living room, our entryway. We got new plants and they're doing well. So I mean, yeah, like we were a bit sad, but we were also open to negotiation. At least finding this out sooner rather than later means we have time to do our research and prepare for the meeting.
Yo, I can't believe these shorts from Fabletics are $10.
Look at the shorts I used to wear to the gym. Now look at the Fabletics One short. So much better. These shorts are so versatile. I've got the towel loop, zipper pockets, the store
landlord, which brings us to probably the juiciest and most practical part of this video. So to help us come up with a number in mind in terms of compensation and to negotiate effectively, we had to do some research and figure out how these cases are typically handled and what's usually considered fair. I tried searching online for some resources, but there was actually nothing that I could find that was in English. I did come across a couple of helpful articles in Japanese, which I translated through my browser, and I'll have them linked below, but right now I'm just gonna highlight some of the key points from those articles that ended up being the most helpful for us. I prepared a few notes on my laptop. So first of all, when a landlord is the one that wants to break contract and the tenant didn't do anything wrong, the landlord typically has to pay an eviction fee, so compensation, and this compensation can actually be up to 24 months worth of rent depending on the situation. And at the minimum, the compensation should cover at least 3 things. So here's the formula from the site, which I'll have on the screen. First, there's the moving fee. So this refers to a moving truck. They estimated it at 130,000 yen, but it can be more or less depending on how far you're moving and how much stuff you have. And then there's brokerage fees, which refers to the commission that you'll have to pay to your real estate agent for helping you move into your new place and do the contracts. And this is typically 1 month's worth of rent. Then what gets interesting is this rent increase, etc. So this comprises of 2 things. It refers to the upfront fees that you have to pay to your new landlord, which is like key money, a lock exchange, etc. And this can be up to a few months worth of rent. And the second thing that's part of this category is that you should take into account how much more it will cost you now to rent something on the market that is comparable to what you're currently living in. And the reason for this is that in Japan, when you sign a regular rental contract, which is the most common type, it means that you're actually protected from rent increases and your contract can be renewed for as many times as you want as long as you pay the renewal fee, which is usually 1 month's worth of rent every 2 years. This is why it's reasonable to be compensated for this if the landlord wants you to break contract and lose that fixed rate and stability. Once you estimate the monthly difference of how much it'll cost you to find something on the market now, you can actually multiply it by 12 to 24 months and then just added onto the amount of compensation that you ask for. Of course, that last bit is only relevant if you have a regular rental contract. This is in contrast to fixed term contracts, which you'll sometimes see, but they're less common. These ones don't get auto-renewed. It's usually when the landlord only wants to rent their place out for a fixed amount of time, or they want the ability to raise rent after a while. So that's something to pay attention to if you're ever looking for a place to rent here. But for us, we have regular contracts, thank goodness. And it was a huge relief for us to see that the norm here is that the tenants are usually well taken care of. With the range in compensation being so wide though, like from 6 months up to something like 24 months worth of rent, we needed to figure out where we were within that. And the article does bring up something pretty important, which is the legitimacy of the reason for eviction. So this is basically how justified it is for the landlord to kick you out. So examples of strong reasons would be safety reasons, or if the tenant broke some rules or defaulted on rent or something like that. In those cases, the tenant doesn't really have much bargaining power, whereas if it's a weak justification, such as in this case, they just want to demolish the building so that they can redevelop for profit, that's considered a weak justification, and therefore we can negotiate a bit harder. There's also a few other quick points that we thought of that weren't mentioned in the articles. One is that we'll have to take days off work, which is a time cost on our end. So viewing apartments, going to the real estate office to review contracts, and going through the actual move-in process, this is all very time consuming. And two is just generally taking into account the uncertainty and the risk that we're taking on for breaking our contract and having to find a new place. There's always a chance that we might not be able to find a place that meets our criteria within such a fixed time frame. Thirdly, this is